everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about failure, more specifically the fear of failure and how we respond to failure in the kink community. And I really want to break this down on multiple levels, whether that be individual failure, failure in relationships, how failure affects our community, and how we might be able to respond to and think about failure in a better way to hopefully have better outcomes for everyone involved. And I think where I want to start this conversation is on a very individual, personal level, because I think that does the easiest, best job of demonstrating how failure can affect sort of our whole community and how people generally tend to respond to it. And I think as far as having a negative reaction to failure is concerned, the archetype for that is the perfectionistic submissive. And I would know that because that is me all over. I think that is really common, especially with service submissives. I think part of the desire to have that like firm structure of service or of DS in more general terms is that you want to have the rules, you want to have the structure, because when you know what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is, it's theoretically harder to mess up than having to kind of just guess as you go along. And what can end up happening though is when you are more on the perfectionistic side, you can hold yourself to a higher standard than the dominant does. So let's say, for example, you are making dinner for your dominant and they tell you, for the dinner salad, I don't want any tomatoes, and you've like already put tomatoes in the big salad bowl. So when you are serving up their bowl, you try to like get around the tomatoes, but oh no, underneath on the very bottom, there's a tomato in the bowl. And then when they get the bowl, they're eating their salad, and then boop, they hit the bottom and they go, what's this? Is this a tomato? And they mean it as just like a joke to point out like, ha ha ha, you tried really hard, but you failed. And that happens to all of us. It's just a tomato. It's not a big deal. It's literally just, it's a cherry tomato. Who cares? But internally on the inside, you're like, oh my God, I left the tomato in the bowl. Oh my God, I'm the worst sub ever. What if they were allergic to tomatoes? What if I could have just killed them? Like, you freak out. And that may not be something that you verbalize, but like internally, it's like, oh no, I messed up. And your dom can literally be like, look, it was just funny because you are always so perfect. I never have anything to reprimand you for. So it's funny that it would be something so small as a forgotten tomato. And you are just inconsolable. You are beating yourself up on the inside. You're like, I can never be forgiven. I forgot the tomato. And what ends up happening is you are essentially your own dom. You aren't really listening to when your dom says something is okay or not, or when something isn't permissible. It's your own highest standards. More accurately, it is your own internal critic's standard. It is your inner perfectionist, and your perfectionist, your inner critic, is then your dom. And so obviously it is really hard to have meaningful power exchange when the thing inside of you is really the thing that's in control and is dominating you, not the external person you're supposedly in a relationship with. And that's really, really difficult, because even if you can kind of separate those two and ultimately know that, hey, like what my dom says he wants or she wants or they want, whatever it is they say that they want is what matters, there is still the factor of that failure eroding away the relationship to some degree, because when you are beating yourself up constantly, you are kind of creating a negative association with the power exchange, because your brain goes, following these rules and then failing when I try to follow the rules makes me upset. Therefore, rules make me upset, rules are bad. And that is very shaky territory to build a DS relationship off of. Now, before I get too far into this, I do want to say this is not going to be a video where I tell you how to solve your inner critic, how to stop being a perfectionist. That is way more than I can get into in a 15 to 20 minute long video. So I will put some links down below to videos, books, audiobooks that you can check out if you want to start on the pathway of maybe being able to work through some of those things. The reason why I bring this up actually is because I think it illustrates the most intense, concentrated form of fear of failure that can really exist on an individual level, at least from my knowledge and experience. However, I think that we absolutely hold other people and other people in the BDSM community in terms of other sides of the slash and other orientations to very high standards as well. And I think what can happen is, for example, we have service submissives that maybe have very internally, like excruciatingly high standards for themselves. But on the opposite side of the slash, we can externally hold doms and tops to very, very high standards. And that can also be internal for them as well. I know so many doms and tops that are like new to the scene, and instead of being excited about getting to do BDSM, they are terrified about messing up. And I think some of that is just, when you're nervous, when you haven't done something before, you're going to be afraid of screwing it up. But I think that is increased by the way that we as a community respond to failure and the expectations that we hold doms and tops to. And, for myself, I try really hard to make it clear to new doms and tops that they are totally welcome, that we want to have them around, that, your first scene does not have to be perfect. Go slowly, build over time, gain your confidence, all of that good stuff. But there's only so much I can really do to combat the standards that we actually hold doms and tops to, because that is a thing. And it is there. And if you are a dom or a top and you have gone through this, please sound off down in the comment section below, because I know I'm not the only person that has seen this. But what can end up happening is you have the compilation of the internal fear of failure, like, oh no, I'm a new dom, I don't want to screw up, what if I hurt somebody, oh no, with the external posed fear of failure of, we really don't want this person to screw up because we will judge them based on how their scene goes, and we will make sort of final judgment of this person based on how they happen to do their first couple of scenes. And that's really, really scary, but I think that's also somewhat the reality of it. For example, let's say you are a new dom and you do your first scene in a public play space, and it just it goes off the rails a little bit. Like your brats too hard and you can't control them, or you accidentally, whack somebody on the kidney too many times because your flogging isn't as good on a real person as it was on your pillowcase at home, or maybe you're trying bondage and then a DM has to come over and cut your bottom out of the rope or the cuffs you're using because they're experiencing, nerve damage in progress, like something just really awful happens. And even knowing that this person is new, what can happen is we assess that person as being dangerous, as being bad, as being unsafe. And even though typically stuff like that, especially with a new person, is not a bannable offense, will not get somebody kicked out of a dungeon, it can make somebody a little bit of a social pariah in the kink community. And that's what I mean when I say we don't have conversations about this, because being a new dom, being a new top is really, really fucking difficult all the way around, right? In social spaces, before you have played with anybody, you are treated with suspicion. You are treated sort of at a distance, like other doms maybe don't want to socialize with you because it's a power thing for them to not do that. And newer submissives, or submissives in general, maybe don't want to talk to you because they don't know what your motivations are. Because unfortunately, there are people that come into the scene just to spectate, to find a hookup, and that leaves a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But the opposite side of the reality of that is new doms and tops become isolated. They don't have access to the resources that maybe they need. Like, let's say you do have classes about flogging or electroplay or whatever else. yeah, you can practice on yourself at home, but if you don't have the social acumen to get a demo bottom to be willing to do those classes with you, it's really hard to actually learn those skills in a really concrete way. And I'm not saying that we should have service subs lined up to volunteer demo bottom to brand new tops just for the sake of it. But I think it's important to recognize how that dynamic plays out and why it is so likely that a new top or a new dom will fail, often spectacularly in public, because of the situation they happen to find themselves in the current way that the scene is made up. And for the record, this does not even have to be doms and tops that are new and like mess up in public. So for example, let's say you're at a munch, and it's a munch that has a private patio area, so it is more closed off from vanilla gaze than typical. And maybe somebody has done some decorative bondage and they've had it on underneath their like zip up jacket, and they unzip it to show it off, and they're talking with their friends about like, oh, this is the rope I used, and this is the technique, and here's the link to the video where I found a tutorial for it, and blah blah blah. And then you have a new person that comes in and says, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, and they reach out to touch the person. They want to touch the rope. Now, if you've been in the kink scene for a while, or if you are somebody with curly hair, you know what's about to happen. You know what's about to happen. You don't just touch people. You don't just reach out and touch people and go, ooh, pretty shiny, I want to know what that's like. In the kink community, we do have very explicit rules around like, don't touch people without permission. There's very, very good reasons for that. However, if you are a brand new person that is at a casual social gathering that has not had the opportunity to learn that yet, you're gonna mess up. And there's two different ways to respond to this interaction. Sometimes the person freaks out and is like, oh my God, how could you do that? Don't touch me, go away. And they push the person away, maybe physically, they yell at them, they berate them, they swear at them. They make the person feel awful for making a mistake that typically like wouldn't be a problem in vanilla spaces, because you have to remember, kink reality, vanilla reality. Kink, very clear boundaries, do not touch somebody without their permission. Vanilla world, that shit happens all of the time. So they never had the opportunity to learn that that was something that they shouldn't do, because they were operating under the rules that they understood. So you can either yell at somebody and basically run them out of the scene because they're going to be like, oh my God, I had no idea what was happening. I guess I really don't fit in with these people, and they never ever come back. That happens a lot. Or I think the healthier method, getting into maybe some solutions for dealing with failure in the kink community, is to have that be a teachable moment. And it does suck to have things like that happen where you have to be the one that does the teachable moment. But if you can evaluate that that was an honest mistake, that they weren't groping, they weren't trying to do anything sexual, they were like, oh, I want to touch your arm to feel that rope, right? If you have the wherewithal to do so, you can be like, you can maybe gently grab their hand, push it back, and be like, hey, just so you know, in our community, we don't touch without permission. So if you would like to, ask again, and then I'd be happy to tell you where on my body I'm like comfortable with you touching. Or maybe I can have you look closer, right? Or answer your questions, whatever it happens to be. And so I think there has to be sort of a moderation between the extreme negative response and like the teachable moment. And it's important to recognize, I'm not talking about consent violations. I'm not talking about scenarios where people would obviously know the rules and go against them anyways. I'm talking about when people make those little oopsie moments that I think are resolvable and sort of allow somebody to learn things that they might not otherwise learn. I have a good example of this myself that I have sort of had to navigate as well. So one of the things that I do in my community is I volunteer, and I oftentimes do what is known as social DMing. So I don't DM parties, I DM the social space. I help people with like navigating conversations, making sure people feel comfortable, just helping the whole vibe out. And there was one time at a party, we had somebody that was brand new that had just gotten their membership, and I knew this because I had like, I don't know, I think I had checked them in or something as well, and so I knew that they were new for some reason. And they were at the party, and they were also dressed like they didn't really like know how to be in a BDSM space. They were in like khakis and like a blue button-up shirt or something, like just very like, could be office casual, probably not a BDSM party outfit, but they were sitting by themselves and I saw them pull out their phone. Now at my dungeon, phones are a very, very, very big no-no. No phones allowed, does not matter. No phones in the dungeon, no phones in the social area. Do not text, call, photos, nothing. None of that. Any reason, anytime. We do have a curtained off area where if you do need to make a safe call or check in with a friend, you can do that in an area where it is secluded and cut off from the actual play that is happening. But this person was not there. They were just on a bench, on a stool or something, and they pulled out their phone. What could have happened is somebody else could have seen that and freaked out and been like, oh my God, this person is taking pictures of us. Panic, oh no, they broke the rules, get them banned immediately. What I did instead was I went up to this person and I was like, hey, just so you know, no phones allowed in the dungeon. Okay, you remember that, right, from the orientation? No phones in the dungeon? And they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just did that by reflex because they were so used to just pulling their phone out of their pocket. You know, when you get bored, when you're on the toilet, on the subway, the bus, whatever, you're just like, oh, bored, pulling out my phone. It was just a pure reflex. They knew it was against the rule, but like they didn't quite fully like control the impulse response essentially. And after that happened, never came up again, never had a problem. They kept coming back to parties. It was completely a non-issue. And so I think there is room for grace. I think we need to give ourselves grace and give other people grace. And what I mean by grace is giving somebody a little bit of compassion, a little bit of wiggle room to make understandable human mistakes, and then watching them to see if the behavior keeps up or if it changes. So in the scenario of the cell phone incident, what I would have done is, what I actually ended up doing was they kept their phone. I did not take it away from them. That could have potentially also been an option, but I just watched them really closely the rest of the night and they never brought out their phone again. However, if I had been able to get confirmation, like I did, that they knew that taking out their phone was wrong and they did it again, the grace period is over. You're going to have a pretty serious talking to from the head DM and probably getting kicked out of that party at that point because it is a security issue. But allowing that grace, allowing that little bit of a period where somebody can learn and then not do a behavior again, I think is really key. Because so often what ends up happening is we basically terrify people out of not being in the kink scene because of the way that we react to minor failures. And I think one important way that we can address this as more experienced people in BDSM, because we will still make failures, is to lead by example. Show other people compassion. Show yourself compassion when you make mistakes. Like going back to the service sub discussion of earlier, if you accidentally forget the cherry tomato at the bottom of the bowl, be like, oh hey, that was like a silly mistake I made. My dom says it's fine. I'll make them a new bowl and double check that there's no tomatoes. Problem solved, moving on with your day. When it comes to something that is more interpersonal, more part of the community, like if you do make a mistake, address the mistake directly. Say exactly what it is that you did wrong to the person you wronged. Apologize in a sincere fashion. Make a plan to change the behavior and then actually change the behavior. Have that follow through. Hold yourself accountable. And when we have those good examples in the community of how to respond to failure, everyone else benefits from that because then they know what to do too, instead of just hiding it or running away from it. And I think something else that will make a really big change is how we think about failure, because I think for many of us, we consider failure to be the worst possible outcome, the thing that should be avoided at all costs because it's the worst thing ever. And instead, I think it would be healthier to understand that failure is part of the process. Failure is how you grow. So instead of thinking about something like, let's go back to the service sub cherry tomato analogy from earlier, rather than seeing it as like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I'm not meant to be a service sub. I've totally messed up. This is awful. You can go, hey, this was a thing that happened that I did not do a perfect job at, but it's okay because my dom says that it's fine. I am going to instead make another bowl where I do not have any cherry tomatoes in it for them to serve to them. And then I am just going to let it go because it has been resolved and my dom says that there's nothing that needs to be apologized for or rectified. And if you do have a power exchange relationship where something does need to be rectified and needs to be enforced, then you do whatever punishment or discipline you're going to do and you let that rest. You do not punish yourself farther than that. And even outside of power exchange, right? When you are learning a new skill, like let's say you're learning how to do bondage, you're going to mess up. You are going to do 99 imperfect single column ties before you do a perfect one. And if you beat yourself up during those 99 that you failed at, you're never going to get to that 100th perfect one. And also, it doesn't have to be perfect. Perfect is not the goal. Perfect is an impossible thing to aspire to, because even if you try your very, 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 very best, there will always be something that you could have done better. So it's wiser to let go of that expectation than hold on to an impossible standard. And yeah, I think that's everything that I want to talk about in this video. I hope that some of this made sense, the whole idea of like showing yourself compassion so you can show others compassion, giving yourself grace so you can give others grace. Allowing people to make mistakes while still holding them accountable, right? That's very, very important. Again, I am not trying to excuse consent violation, groping, rule breaking. I'm just saying there has to be a little bit of room, especially with new people, for those mistakes to happen, because our community does have such different higher standards in many ways compared to the vanilla world, and that does take some adjustment and correction. And it's important to keep in mind in general. Anyways, I would love to hear what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related subjects. And finally, if you would like to support this channel, the best way that you can do that is with Patreon. Our link to that will be down below. We are currently trying to make our way to 1,000 patrons. If you already support me over there, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.